In March, a tiny solar manufacturing company in San Jose, California submitted a petition to the U.S. Department of Commerce to investigate solar exports from 4 Southeast Asian countries. This one move essentially froze the U.S. solar industry. The U.S. solar industry is having a rough time right now, and I want to talk about it. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's been a while. Hi. How are you? It's been over a month. And I don't like that. And I don't want to do that again. That was like a little too long for me. We're not doing that again. So I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. Let's just get into it. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckisphere, where we talk about climate news and solutions. Today, we're going to talk about the Department of Commerce's investigation of Asian solar tariffs that was spurred on by a petition from Auxin Solar and is slowly killing the US solar industry. I have been talking about this for a few months now on my climate news podcast, The Climate Recap, which you can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Let's start from the beginning with how solar panels are made, because we can't know what tariffs apply where if we don't understand all the moving parts. There's basically 4 steps to making photovoltaic solar panels, which are the dominant type of solar panel in the market. First, chunks of silicone are melted at high temperatures in heavy cylindrical blocks called ignits. The ignits are then sliced into thin sheets called wafers, and phosphorus and semiconductors are then added to the wafers to make solar cells. And finally, the cells are soldered together to make solar modules, also known as solar panels. The first solar cell was made in the US Bell Labs in 1954. And for the rest of the 20th century, this country was primarily the manufacturer of solar cells and modules in the world. Granted, this technology wasn't really in that high of a demand until the 2000s. Imagine if we had started mass deploying solar technology way back then. But anyways, as the conversation about global warming started to grow louder and louder, China paid attention, and as it does with anything it sees trending, it heavily subsidized the production of solar cells and modules. On the bright side, this move drastically dropped the price of solar technology globally, getting us to where we are today, with solar being price comparative with natural gas. On the downside, it pretty much knocked the US solar manufacturing industry off the playing field. President Obama tried to help out the domestic production by imposing 24 to 36% solar tariffs on Chinese solar panels and cells in 2012, and that eventually went to include Taiwan. This move was also due to a 1930s rule that any foreign nation that was trying to subsidize to basically kill competition would be tariffed automatically. The problem with this tariff on Chinese solar projects is that it might have been a little too late as far as the US domestic solar industry is concerned, because the damage had already been done. The US solar industry was now heavily reliant on imports, with 86% of solar jobs focusing on solar installation, not manufacturing. When the Chinese tariffs were put in place, the US demand just moved to Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. So President Trump's further expansion of solar tariffs to include more of those countries in 2018, which included the countries I just mentioned, just made the solar price shoot up more. Now the cost of installing utility scale solar in the US is among the highest in the world. Varun Shivaram, a former senior researcher scholar at Columbia University and a current member of the Biden administration, put it like this, quote, "But if Obama's tariffs closed the barn doors after the horse bolted, then Trump's 2018 tariffs was like putting a lock on the door." This is crazy. I don't know why I think this is so weird. This is crazy. Okay, so I'm doing a video on solar tariffs, right? And I'm quoting this one person who is like a professor at Columbia, and now he works for Biden's administration. He looked really young. I was like, oh my gosh, how old is this guy? He's like 32, 33. And then I saw he went to my high school. The only part of this domestic solar manufacturing that tariffs seemed to help was solar panel assembly, but we still mostly import solar cells. Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam didn't get slapped with as high of tariffs as China and Taiwan did, so they currently make up over 80% of US solar imports. Biden extended tariffs on China after it came out in 2021 that Chinese solar cells and modules are linked to forced labor in Uyghur internment camps. Uyghurs are a Muslim minority in China that the Chinese government is essentially trying to erase from existence. It's a horrible situation, and I recommend that you look up that whole situation if you don't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, that's a fair reason to keep tariffs on China. But overall, solar tariffs seem to have done little to restart domestic solar manufacturing and might have actually hindered solar deployment. According to the Solar Energy Industries Association, the US solar industry has lost up to 62,000 jobs, and the tariffs have kept 10.5 gigawatts of solar capacity from being installed. 10.5 gigawatts is equivalent to about 8.5% of the US's current solar capacity. And that's the playing field on which we find ourselves. Most solar bodies seem to oppose solar tariffs outright, though the small domestic manufacturing industry that still benefits from tariffs supports them. For example, First Solar, which is the largest solar manufacturing company in the US, does support tariffs and the recent petition, which I'm finally getting to. So at the beginning of 2022, Auxin Solar, a solar manufacturing company in San Jose, which is where I'm from, came across research conducted by Bloomberg NEF, the research arm of the larger Bloomberg organization. The research looked at the supply chain of US solar imports. The research showed that Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam import a lot of their solar parts, like ingots and wafers, from China, which set up red flags for Auxin Solar because Auxin Solar is one of the manufacturers that supports tariffs, and to them, the research meant that China was circumventing US solar tariffs by going through those countries. Concerned, they sent a petition to the US Department of Commerce in February in which they mentioned BNEF's research 38 times. The department took up this case in March. And as soon as the US solar industry heard of this investigation, it froze, especially after research found that the department could impose retroactive tariffs on solar cells and modules from those countries of up to 250%. That would spell a death sentence for the US solar industry. The current uncertainty alone has already delayed or canceled about 300 solar projects, which is about 24 gigawatts. It also has resulted in the potential layoff of 38,000 people, which is like a third of the solar workforce. A study by the American Clean Power Association confirms that if the Department of Commerce issues tariffs on solar projects from those 4 Asian countries that I keep mentioning, it would result in a 65% drop in utility scale solar projects in the US. Keep in mind, the Biden goal is to decarbonize our energy sector by 2035, which is heavily reliant on the solar industry. The craziest thing of all of this is that Bloomberg NEF researchers that conducted the study came out recently saying that Auxin Solar misrepresented their research. They say that their research shows that Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam are importing resources from China, yes, but then they're making them into more complex products. Like they're buying wafers from China and turning them into solar modules. That means China isn't circumventing tariffs at all. So this whole debacle could be based on a non-issue. So what now? Well, the investigation can't be stopped once it's started. So earlier this month, a bipartisan group of 22 senators penned a letter to Biden urging him to expedite the process to bring back market stability. 60 House lawmakers might have just done the same thing recently. The Department of Commerce needs to determine if China's products were substantially altered enough to not require retroactive tariffs. And I haven't heard anyone else talking about the Bloomberg NEF researchers' statement besides Canary Media, who originally broke the news. There's also some bills to repeal solar tariffs altogether that are floating around in Congress right now. The Democrat senator of Nevada and the Republican senator of Kansas introduced one of those bills in mid-February before this whole investigation even started. Their bill removes solar tariffs and founds a Department of Energy program to help spur domestic manufacturing. I'm just hoping that this investigation will determine that the 4 Asian countries are altering products like BNEF research suggests, and therefore the whole thing ends soon, because we need it to end soon. I forgot to mention that the Department of Commerce will present the investigation's primary findings on August 30th, 2022, as of now, when it publishes the preliminary duty rate for importers of all products. This will serve as the basis for deposits until it issues the final decision on January 26th, 2023. So we want to have them expedite this whole timeline. It's honestly interesting how bipartisan this whole thing is. I go ahead and sound off in the comments below why you think this issue of all things is super bipartisan, but so far this whole thing has been extremely bipartisan. I'm just hoping that the investigation will determine that the 4 Asian countries are altering the products that they get from China, like BNEF research suggests, and that the whole investigation ends soon, because retrospective data will already show that 2022 was not the year for US domestic solar installation. If you work for the solar industry, I would love to hear your thoughts about everything going on right now. Let me know how you feel about tariffs. This is not the only reason solar is being hindered right now in the US. Permitting is also a nightmare right now, but that is for another short deep dive, which is going to be my next short deep dive. The longer deep dive I'm going to do next is on how the US can effectively modernize its grid to be more resilient, accepting of clean energy, and cost less to consumers. So stay tuned for that. If you would like to make your voice heard, I'll leave a link to where you can email the Secretary of Commerce to not kill the solar industry. I'm never really sure how much those kind of things help. I wish I had more of a call of action to give to you. Here's a call to action. Subscribe to the Beccasphere Climate Quarter YouTube channel and my weekday climate news podcast, The Climate Recap. My podcast is the quickest way that you can keep up with this ongoing story, because I do update my listeners regularly on this whenever there's any new information. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and also a fellow YouTube channel that I have. I publish an episode every weekday morning that covers international and US-based climate news in about 10 minutes. So if you would like to effortlessly be updated during your morning commute or while you're on lunch break, that's a really easy way to do it. And it's just so important to stay updated with this news, because how can you call bullshit on companies and countries if you're not updated, right? I want people to be able to look at like car commercials and be like, yeah, okay, you say you're green, but like, that's not what I heard on the Climate Recap, so just saying. I also heard that's a great thing to listen to when you're working out, because it can be rage-inducing. But I do cover good news too. Actually, a lot of it is good news, just saying. Until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news organizations. A big shout out to the people on Patreon who help me pay for my equipment and the many news subscriptions that make these videos possible. A special shout out to the climate confident and courageous David H., Norman Anal, Greg H., Paul B., Phil Plasma, Holly M., and Dan Morton. I greatly appreciate your support. If you would like to monetarily support the work I do, you can check out the Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below for reoccurring or one-time payments. Bye for now.